Hello everyone, welcome to GPCCI Insight. I'm Tobias Peterson from the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industries. And the last month has been a struggle, not only for most companies, but in particular for the people within the companies. From leaders, international or local, to everyone being part of the workforce. Many of us are working from home, have their own new burdens and challenges to carry. So we were wondering, it brings an extra challenge to leaders of Filipino teams. So today, I'm here with business coach, consultant, and best-selling author Mike Grogan, leadership trainer, keynote speaker, and mentor consultant based in the Philippines since 2015. So hi, Mike.
Hey, Toby.
Great to have you here, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. One of the big topics that we have been thinking right now, and we also do trainings together, is toxic leadership during these times of uncertainty. Everyone is working remotely, or many people working remotely. They don't see their teams. They might have a different mindset, and there are new challenges for leaders that they might not be prepared for or aware of. So if we might want to start, Mike, in your opinion, what is toxic leadership?
So I think everyone listening to this can reflect on their own experience. Have they ever worked in a team where the culture or environment was toxic? I'm pretty sure everyone can relate at some stage of their career where they really felt disempowered in a team. And to give some practical examples of that, it could be that you and your fellow team members were afraid to bring up problems or tough issues with your direct supervisor. That's one example. Team members felt uncomfortable taking initiative to do anything that could draw attention to themselves. Team members are afraid to ask for help from their boss or their teammates in case they're labeled as weak or stupid. Team members are also hesitant to offer help to each other in case they believe that others will be offended by this assumption that they need help. Or another example would be where team members send negative signals to each other if they try and speak up about difficult issues. So that's an example of, and there's lots of examples in the Philippines and Asia and around the world of environments where there's no transparency, there's no accountability, there's no ownership, and there's really no example in the world of a high-performing culture where the environment is toxic. So I think that's my short answer to what it looks like.
Thank you. And if you are a leader, and of course you have the best intentions, but sometimes you might not even be aware that you have negative impact onto your teams, although you're trying your best, especially now with new challenges that we have here. So when it comes to leaders, may it be managers, may it be the general managers, CEOs, etc., supervisors, how can they identify, based on maybe the feedback of their teams, that the way they're managing right now is negatively affecting their team and the performance of the team?
Well, the short answer is extremely hard to do exactly what you said in terms of getting honest feedback from your own people. In Asia, I would argue probably it's 10 times harder to get that feedback in Asia than in Europe or North America or Australia or Western cultures where there's more candor in terms of these difficult conversations. So the leader, whether they be a local Filipino leader or an expat leader, they really need to be innovative in finding ways to get honest feedback from their team, because usually, with very few exceptions, but usually most leaders are not aware that there's certain things they're doing that has a very demotivating impact on their team. So if you've ever heard the phrase, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, many times what you're saying is not necessarily wrong. However, in the culture that you're working in, especially if you're not born in that culture, it's being perceived very differently, very negatively. So to get honest feedback, and I'll just share with you the one question that has really helped me the most is, and I think this will really benefit if we have non-Filipino leaders, but to sit down with a small group of your team and ask, hey, what are the small things I can do to work better with your culture, with the Filipino culture, especially being an expat? And What I found is, of all the questions I've asked my team in the 6 years that I've lived here, that has been the most insightful, because it's almost like I give them permission to give me all of these lots of tiny little things, and it was all in the how that was having a demotivating impact, and was unintentionally creating a level of toxicity in my team that I was not aware of. So that's just one tactic that leaders can use to help expose some of their blind spots about their management style.
So listening is a big factor, listening to the team and being open to their responses as well.
Of course, yes. But in Asia, you need to be even more innovative, because I'm sure every listener of this will realize that, many times you ask your team, what are they thinking? And they just nod their heads and say nothing. So leaders, and the key word here is psychological safety. Psychological safety is identified around the world from hundreds of different studies, that this is the single biggest factor that determines the engagement level and performance of the team. However, one thing that research has also highlighted is in cultures in Asia, where there's such a hierarchical culture and such a culture of honor and shame, psychological safety is 10 times more important than in Western cultures.
Wow.
So for leaders, that's where they really need to emphasize, okay, how can I create an environment of safety, psychological safety, so that my guys, my people, my direct reports will open up and actually share what they're really thinking. I won't say it's easy, but it is worth it. And it is a critical milestone to get to that high-performing culture that we all want.
Thank you very much. What would be your top 3 aspects to keep in mind if you're looking at the situation right now?
So if you had a toxic work environment before the lockdown, for sure, in most cases, it's going to get worse when people are working from home, because of that physical connection is gone. And we're now relying on technology, which is wonderful in one way, because we connect in ways we didn't do before, but obviously in terms of human connection, nothing is more important than face-to-face. So with that said, if I were only give one recommendation, it is, how can you dedicate the first 5 minutes of all your team meetings to just human connection, and not to go straight into the work or ABC, was this done, was that done, status updates, whatever, just to dedicate the first 5 minutes to the human connection. Hey, how's everyone feeling, guys? Checking in, what gave you joy? What's your highlight of the weekend? What's your stress level? Out of 10, how are you feeling? And these are just small little micro things, but they matter. They really matter. And I'm sure all of us know. I've got a lot of friends who are really, not here in the Philippines, in other countries, that have really, their hatred for their boss has 10x'd over the lockdown period. And they just give me this feedback that I don't feel he or she cares. That's it. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So because we're working virtually now for now in the foreseeable future, leaders need to put in extra effort, because we can, we're using this technology, but extra effort to let their team know that they really do care about them. And I think that's the number one. However, and there's hundreds of ways to do that, but you have to find innovative ways. And it could only take 5 minutes in your team meeting, whether once a week or once a day. It depends on your frequency. So I think that's my number one tip: how to create more empathy in your team and more caring.
And when we look at now creating a good and positive environment, that's what we talked about, and also making sure that the team members know that their superiors care about them. What would be a pitfall, something that leaders should definitely not do right now, that can be the highest demotivator, for example?
Well, the top of my head, of course, is the assumptions. I don't think any leader I know intentionally wants to make their team feel down, intentionally wants to create this stress, emotional stress in their team. And I'm hearing from a lot of our clients the word burnout. I know a lot of people don't like that word, but regardless if it's true or perceived burnout, it's a perception, a story have in their head. So I think it's really to create opportunities to challenge those assumptions. So I think not even asking could be the biggest mistake. Just assuming that, for example, it's a reality. Like most clients, I know their hours are now longer, because it does, as much as technology is a blessing, it takes longer to have a meeting in a virtual world than it does if it was face-to-face.
Yeah.
So the meetings are longer, number one, and the limits, the rules of virtual work, most companies haven't established that. So people are working well beyond what would be considered normal before lockdown. So people are working longer and harder, and now we call it Zoom fatigue or virtual fatigue. And I think the biggest failure, what we assume the rules of pre-COVID are applicable to this new norm. And I think having conversations about what is our norm for how we communicate, how we text. Are we allowing people to text to each other on a Sunday? Are we allowing people to text each other after 7 p.m.? What is the new norms now? So I think it's having to sit down about what is our norms for when we're online and when we're offline, because I think investing in your team's mental and emotional health offline is important to give and to respect that. And I know bosses that are so unaware of this, that they're sending messages to their teammates on a Sunday, and it's really frustrating people. But because they haven't established the norms, hey, the manager, it's not that the manager is bad. He thinks, oh, I'll just share an idea on a Sunday. So these are good things to explore with your team about what are the norms for this virtual world. And a lot of companies have, but a lot of folks are still just assuming we'll just carry on the way we always have. And we know that there has to be some flexibility. So that's my long-winded answer to that great question.
It wasn't that long-winded, actually. That was quite concise. Thank you so much for that. Here in the Philippines is especially also a factor, not only in the Philippines, in Asia generally, the fear of losing face, which has not changed from the physical environment and now the virtual environment. So when it comes to feedback, are there certain things that should be taken into consideration in case you're not satisfied with the performance of an individual?
Oh, yes. So absolutely, this fear of losing face, it's going to be around for a very long time. It's a generational thing from childhood in society. It's not something that multinational companies or foreigners are going to change overnight. It's going to take a lot of time and pressure in a good way to get people to open up to more high performing behaviors of being direct and when appropriate. So I think definitely there's two different responses to this. What I've seen work is using focus groups. That's one, either an outsider or out of your company to facilitate focus groups, which is 100% confidential, to get insights into how people are thinking. And outsiders could be from outside the department or just outside the company completely, but some way for people to express their thoughts. The tool I use is psychological mapping to get feedback on the manager's blind spots. So that's number one. And then number two is difficult conversations. I think of all the training modules that I've done in the Philippines, and even in other countries in Asia, I think the one that has seen the most breakthroughs in the fastest time is difficult conversations or critical conversation, however you want, a rapid accountability workshops. There's different labels for the same thing, essentially. But the key thing of this is it's not like a normal training in terms of, the ABC of how to do a difficult conversation. Step one, step two, the planning phase, all that's all good. That's to say the same globally. But that for here in Asia, it's only 20% of the piece. 80% of the piece is overcoming the fears. It's the psychological piece that's holding that person back, the voice inside that supervisors or frontline staff's head that's holding them back from actually talking to their boss about a certain issue or highlighting a problem or challenging a customer, saying no, per se. So that's the type of stuff that companies will really see a lot of ROI when they help their teams. And it's not just like a one speech and it's over, but just over time to break down these false stories. Because many times they just put the label difficult conversation on it, but it's not really. It's just a story they have in their head. So that's the one we've seen most breakthroughs, helping Filipino leaders at all levels make difficult conversations the norm. And it's only 20% technical and it's all 80% psychological.
So you would say that one of the biggest gaps is wrong communication.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in
misunderstandings.
Just think of any relationship. I look at my own relationships with my friends and my wife. It's always a break. The root cause is always someone misinterprets what the other person said. And it's the same concept in the workplace, but there's even more gaps when there's a cultural difference, when, East meets West. Now, it doesn't mean it's hopeless. It's just that both sides need to do even more work on how to communicate effectively. Because the alternative is, a culture where no one is speaking up. And obviously we know what happens here. Problems, get discovered when it's too late, when the damage is already done. And then, of course, some of your best people leave because you don't know whatever issues they had, they're not sharing, and you don't really have that high-performing culture, and you just have a mediocre culture. So this, I think, all of the training you could do to your employees, it will meet a bottleneck if we can't get over this difficult conversations piece.
Yeah, if we're looking at the staff, what do you think can they do when they feel or they realize that maybe they're suffering from a certain fatigue right now, or you talked about burnout as well, or they're just not quite happy anymore with the way they are performing? How would you recommend bringing that up with the superiors, or how would you recommend them taking a look at themselves to break out of it?
At the beginning of, I think 1 month after lockdown started, when it became obvious that, oh, this is not something that's going to go away, for all my clients, we started doing resilience sessions on this very topic that you're referring to. And because we knew this, we realized that this is a huge need right now. Never before has this topic been more of a greater need, because everyone is fighting a hard battle. And what we've found is that sometimes there's a solution to their issue in terms of, managing their time better or their mental health. And other times the solution, and this might confuse people who are very left-minded brain, the solution isn't necessarily an actual action that to be taken, but just an opportunity to open up and just an opportunity to get empathy from other people that are going through something similar. So that's what we found so magical about the resilience sessions that we did. And once again, nothing magical about me and my delivery or my team's delivery, but it's what we did was just we created a space for teams to get together, just to open up in small groups. Hey, how is everyone feeling? What's been your highlight of lockdown? What's been your greatest struggle? What has helped you and your mental health? What tips are you advising others? And what I found, people don't need an expert speaking to them for an hour of what they should do. I mean, you can get that on YouTube, but the biggest win for companies right now is to create, let's call it environments or virtual rooms where employees can talk about these things. And yeah, you can get a facilitator from the outside to help you, or you can internal resources. But it really, there's something, I don't know, is it karma? I don't know what it is, but when people open up their struggles and empathize with each other, and then you hear someone who's got a far worse situation than you, and you're thinking, oh, maybe my so-called stress isn't as bad as others. So something magical happens when a team is allowed to open up like that. So that's what I've seen as the biggest benefit for the frontline staff, because the frontline staff, the feedback they give, there's like, I feel really grateful to management for doing this. Like, I feel management cares for us to allow us to take an hour out of their work to just open up about these particular issues, or to just get some inspiration from each other. And I think that's going to be what employees remember the most out of this lockdown, how their bosses, how their company made them feel. A lot of companies are doing an amazing job at making their employees feel cared for and making them feel valued. So a lot of companies are doing an actual 5-star job. And then there's companies that are absolutely doing terrible, and they're going to suffer big time. It's not trying to be a warning, but what's going to happen, of course, their best employees will leave eventually, and their performance is going to get worse and worse. And we know it, that in maybe 6 months now, 12 months from now, a lot of those companies will look very different to what they are today. And people will lose their jobs. There's no doubt about it. The toxic works environments will get worse and worse in the virtual world, unless the leader, even if they can't do it organizational, but whatever's in their scope of control, takes the initiative to do something differently and to let the team know that they care, to provide these opportunities for empathy. So yeah, I could go on a rant on this for hours, because I've seen both sides, and I've made mistakes myself on both sides of it.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much. That already wraps up most of our conversation or interview. If you would still have one last statement that you would like to send out to the listeners, what would that be?
Well, I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. So I think, so I'm going to use the Bruce Lee quote about, don't pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult life. So to try and pray away the external pressure, it's not going to work. But to build on the inner strength, that's what's going to be, even when COVID goes away or whenever it goes away, this will be, this is what people remember when they look back at this time, is building the inner strength, the resilience. And it's 1% better every day. That's what we teach for the last 10 years. It's 1% better every day. And people can use that philosophy that's been around for thousands of years. It's not new, but this is what they can use to help them overcome. And yeah, I think our ancestors will say they've had a lot more adversity than us. But we can overcome. We can overcome.
All right. Mike, thank you very much for sharing all of your insights and being here with me. And thank you to the listeners. What's left to say for me is, again, thank you, goodbye, and stay safe and healthy.
Take care, guys. God bless. Take care.